As we work through the exercises in this training course, we need to learn how to save our images to maintain flexibility, especially when we start working with layers. So, with a cactus image open, I want to add a color tint to the image. So, I'll choose the layer menu and then select new fill layer and then gradient. Now, we'll talk about gradient fill layers in more depth later in the course. Right now, what's important is I need to have multiple layers in this document. I'm going to change the mode here from normal to color because if I leave it set to normal, we're just going to see a gradient. We won't see the underlying photo. I'll choose OK and access the gradient fill dialog where I'll use the chevron here in order to access the different preset gradients. I'll go ahead and click to apply one and then click OK, and we can see our multi-layered document now with a gradient fill layer and the background layer. All right, at this point, if I use File and then Save, because my original was a JPEG file and this is a multi-layered document, Photoshop will bring up the Save As dialog, but I always like to be careful, so I usually choose to Save As. Now, I can save this to my computer locally or to the cloud. For now, I'll choose to save it to my computer back into the O4DI Essentials folder. Now, even though Photoshop has changed the file suffix from JPEG to PSD because I'm saving in the Photoshop format, I always like to just append the name here. I'll add an underscore and then ME for master edited. That way I know that this image is my master edited file. I'll go ahead and choose save. And I want to maximize the compatibility. In fact, I always want to do this. So I'm going to choose don't show again. The maximize compatibility, this is going to allow me to work and view images faster and more easily across other applications like Lightroom Classic or Lightroom or Bridge. All right, let's click OK. And if we return to Bridge, we can see that this new PSD file has been added. All right, let's make another change to this in Photoshop. I'm just going to double click on the thumbnail for the gradient fill. That brings up the gradient fill editor, and I can click that same disclosure triangle there to navigate down to the reds and maybe apply a different gradient. Okay, these are pretty bright, so I'm going to apply that and then just decrease the opacity here. Now, if I don't want to save over the last PSD, then I'll just choose File and then Save As again. I'll save it to my computer and I'll append it. And this is where I just use a very simple naming convention. I'll put another underscore and then O1. If I make additional changes, I would just save it as O2, O3, and O4. It's much easier than, say, renaming it to maybe finished and then done and then final. This just will immediately tell me that this is the most recent, it's the highest in the sequence number. All right, I'll save it to that same folder and then click Save. Now, for the most amount of flexibility, you'll want to keep your layered Photoshop files, but most likely you'll also need to send versions of the document to clients or share them with others in different file formats that are smaller and easier to transfer. So in this case, if I did choose File and then Save As or Save a Copy, I do have additional options here. For example, to save as the JPEG file format. But that's kind of all the options I have. I have one more dialog box that would ask me about my compression settings. So instead, I'm going to cancel out of here and I'll choose File and then Export. And I'm going to use Export As. Here I can select from different file settings. I'll go ahead and choose JPEG. I can also resize the image on export. So I can make this 1100 pixels and it will go ahead and scale that down proportionally. I could even add canvas size. So if I wanted to make this 1200 by 833, now I've got a nice white border around my image. I can save the copyright and contact information, convert it to sRGB for the web, and embed a color profile. Now, when I choose export, Photoshop will ask me where I want to save this. And in this case, I would definitely append it, maybe something like underscore and then 1200 px so that I know this is my low res image. It's appended it with JPEG as the file suffix. I'll choose save. And one of the things you'll notice is that I can continue working on my open multi-layered document. Photoshop has basically just exported off a version of the file as the JPEG. And in fact, if we return to Bridge, we see the first change we made, then the dot or underscore '01, and there is the JPEG image. Now, before we wrap up, I typically save my edited PSD and TIFF files back to the same folder as the original. However, there may be times when you want to save all of your edited files to a separate folder. It just depends on the project. But if you do, you can choose your preferences and then file handling. On Windows, this would be under the Edit menu, and then choose whether or not to save to the original folder. I'll go ahead and leave that on for now. And then we can close this image. I haven't done anything to it since I did my last save, so I don't need to save changes here. And there you go. You can choose to save your layered documents on your computer or to the cloud, as well as export files as smaller, flattened images to quickly share with others or post online.